I'm back.
Welcome back. I have now hit the record button.
So, on the topic of airport security,
Yeah.
there have been multiple studies that have been conducted that state that airport security is, on the minimum, at least 80% ineffective, and I
Oh,
fucking terrifying.
so I
Uh,
was at the
I
airport
actually
one
have more
time.
to add to this. Go ahead, Brad.
What?
So-
Bro, I was at the airport one time, right? First
Mhm.
time ever going out of my state, right? Going to Florida, all happy and stuff. I pack my bags.
Mhm.
This motherfucker, right? There's a big officer motherfucker. He's checking my bags and stuff because, I had my Nintendo and stuff, so it kind of looked like a tactical bomb with all the wires. So he was checking it. And he notices that I have apple juice in my bag, which I didn't know that you can't bring liquid
Oh,
onto the
Jesus.
plane, right?
Really?
And he was just like, "Hey, you can't have this, so I'm gonna take it for you, and don't worry, I'll very much enjoy it." And I'm like, "You motherfucker!" As we're walking away, that homie's chugging down my apple juice, bro. I'm like, "No!"
yeah. There's actually a lot more of this stuff that people aren't really aware. It's not even that you're not allowed to bring liquids. It's like you are only allowed to bring certain types of liquids and certain quantities of liquids. Like you are
Yeah,
allowed to bring things like shampoo, hair conditioner, and such, but it has to be in like what is essentially smaller than a normal perfume bottle.
yeah.
And if
It's
you bring
required.
literally anything else or anything more than that, it's either it gets dumped or you down it. It's gone. All right, it's gone. That's it. Those are the only options.
I'm pretty sure it's to make sure that you don't make like chemicals that can potentially harm others on the plane. Like on the plane, like the other passengers won't get fucking suspicious out of nowhere.
Honestly, no clue what the actual reason is.
Like they're sitting here acting like the other passengers are just gonna sit there and watch you making a fucking chemical and be like, yeah, this is fine.
I
It's
assume
just
it's
aspirin.
probably more about trying to keep balance of the plane than anything, but I don't really know for sure.
Doubt it.
Well, considering how they orientate the fuel, it tends to be more in the wings or like the dead center of the plane to help keep it balanced since liquid moves. And they even have a system where they will pump fuel to the end of the plane to help you tip up or to, go sharp. So, with that understanding, there may be the theory that they have is like, oh, well, there's a little liquid on the plane. It might, just display things or something. But this is
Yeah,
speculation.
I don't think that argument is applicable, especially since you're packing so many people into what is essentially a tin can that flies.
Yeah,
Let us not forget we're talking about planes here. So
yeah.
there's obviously going to be a cargo that they have to take no matter what, people and their shit.
Yeah, it's not really one that I feel like makes a lot of sense, but it wouldn't be something that would be completely outlandish to think a company would do that.
Yeah.
It's one of those things.
Just extending from the topic of like airport security.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, there was research conducted that basically said that what are they called? Is it TSA officers or basically the people that check your bags? They're really shit at their job apparently, and
Oh
they
yeah.
can't. They're not. Half the time they don't actually notice stuff that's in your bag that is prohibited on the plane. It was a really big, it was like a really big number. It was like 80% or something of not illicit but prohibited substances and stuff were just passed through the detector and to the people checking the bags, and nothing
Honestly
was
though,
said
that
about
tech like the entire setup around here is like even though it's a bit much, it's also not enough. Like it's not really doing their job as much as they want to pretend it is. And you know this every time you interact with airport security, pretty much.
it. oh the god, the fucking Spanish airport security. Whenever I had to fly back to England to get my papers and shit checked, they're
Yeah.
always they're always so judgy to me, especially because I look different. It's
Yeah.
very odd. It's because I'm very pale.
I mean, I'm a
Spanish
rather
people are
pale person
really
as well,
judgy
though.
on people that are very pale.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, how is
Actually,
airport security in England?
in England, God, I've been through it like quite a few times, especially since I have to fly there and back,
Yeah.
to get shit up. But it's very cut and dry, to be honest. Like there isn't there isn't much going on. You just put your bag on this little wheelie thing and they check it, they put it through the machine. If there's no metal, yeah, you have to take off basically everything that can maybe set off the metal detector, like coats with buttons or shoes, or sometimes even like small things like piercings.
Yeah.
And and when I'm trying to like take everything off, I have a piercing in my ear that I just like to keep in there, and also in my belly button because I don't know, I was stupid.
You
And
have your
I
reasons at
have
the time, who knows?
I know I've never told you about this before.
You have not, no. And now this is in recording as well, but go on.
Yeah. So I have to like go in front of the metal detector when the lady like calls you up to it. Take out all of my fucking like lift up my shirt, take out the piercing there, take out the one in my ear, drop them on the little wheelie thing, hoping to God that they don't fall through the little gaps in the thing,
Oh
and then
no.
walk in and half the time have it be set off by something that's in one of my pockets or the button on my shirt or something.
That you didn't even notice. Oh goodness.
Yeah, it's and then the, oh, another stinger. Um, you have to most of the time if you're flying with certain airlines, enter the weight of your bag and your weight so they can
Yeah.
calculate ticket price. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you or your bag is heavier than like the average or the acceptable weight, they will charge a bit more. Or you can sometimes I there was one point where my bag was like I think a kilo too heavy, so I put on two extra pairs of pants and five extra pairs of socks and walked onto the plane, literally like making sure that my socks weren't literally exploding out of my shoe.
Oh my goodness.
I downed one of my drinks that I had in my bag and like hoped that it would be enough, and it was like 5-ish grams like below the limit, and I was like, yes, amazing. I look like an idiot. I'm wearing 3 pairs of pants.
Yeah. But you can get on the plane.
Yes. I am basically holding onto my shoes, making sure they don't explode.
Yeah, my
Yeah, so
experience.
airport security here.
Yeah, my experience with airport security is actually kind of similar.
Oh God.
Like, weirdly enough. But
Hmm.
not only do we have to go through like the standing up sensor, right? But even if that thing doesn't go off, they'll still come over with the fucking hand wave one and like still scan you over again, and it will do nothing. Like, and then it'll be like, you got anything that you shouldn't have on you?
Oh, there was one time where it was like this sweet old lady went through this fucking metal detector, and it went off, and I was like looking at her, I was like, no, there doesn't seem to be anything metal on her. And then the fucking sensor goes off at her neck or like her collarbone area, and apparently a fucking implant or something set off the metal detector. And
Yeah,
I'm just sat here like, are you seriously about to hold up the whole line because this lady has a bit of metal underneath her skin?
they
I
would.
get that.
They literally would,
I get
though.
the metal scope, but this to go that far, I doubt it.
I have a few stories to go with airport security a
Oh,
bit, right? But the fact that they will actively ask you after all of that if you have any things like metal weapons or something on you is kind of like It's baffling, you know? What the fuck makes you think I was gonna tell you in the first place? And why would I tell you now? Clearly, your method of checking to see if I do doesn't work. You know?
The metal detecting system is going through. They've got like 8 hand grenades on them or some shit, and then they're like, "Yeah, I have 8 hand grenades on me. Why do you ask?"
Yeah. Yeah, here though, like I remember trying to fly even just like from here to Flagstaff, which is, in the same country and stuff. They like I didn't have any metal on my clothing, but I still had to pretty much strip down in order for me to be able to pass through because they kept being like, you need to take it off. As if it was being a problem.
Oh, there was one point where I there was one point where I had to confirm if it was that one of the metal buttons on my shirt making it go off. So I literally ripped it off my shirt and walked through. And the lady was just fucking staring at me like, "What?
Yep.
Did you actually just fucking do that?"
Want to know a different experience I had?
Yes.
Apparently, the idea of a blind person trying to navigate through a plane is considered suspicious activity. This isn't a joke. My attempt to get to the plane that I had a ticket for, I got pulled off by our security because they thought I was being suspicious since I was walking around and occasionally trying to feel the walls. This literally led to me being stuck in a back room for like 2 to 3 hours after that. I missed my flight completely, and I basically had to stand there covering myself because they do like a full strip search in order to make sure you're not doing something when you get pulled back. And the part that bothers me the most is that the entire time it was only the one guy that kept walking around asking questions. Like they had a female
Ooh.
on staff, but they literally only let her in the room for when I got stripped down in the first place, and that was it.
Oh, that is creepy.
It was really unsettling. And at the end of the day, it's like obviously there was nothing going on, so I got released. I was like, oh, sorry for the inconvenience. They didn't refund my ticket, by the way. So in the end, I just
Wow.
didn't get to go because of
So you
this.
just missed your flight.
Completely, yeah.
Jesus. That. Mm.
Very
Mm.
unfortunate.
I've never missed a flight, and I think I'd like to accredit it to my mum literally driving me to the airport 5 hours early every
Yeah.
time she was traveling with me. I'm not kidding. Sometimes my flight would be at like 3, and she'd get me at the airport by 11.
Yeah, that was
Or
the only time I
time.
actually missed a flight, you know? But I don't really take a lot of flights often. Because, like, the only other real flight I took was the flight that I took to go meet my dad for the first time.
Ooh.
And even in that case, my mom literally just dropped me and my sister off at the airport, and I just had to follow my sister to the plane. Like,
That's how old you were at the time.
yeah, and what makes this worse is that sure, my sister was like the protective sis and all, but she also like hated me to the extent that she actively like this was like I think a month after my meeting with dad, but she stabbed my hand. Like she tried to stab me directly, and I blocked, and I ended up with a hole in my hand because of it. And every time something like this happened, her thing was always like, "Well, I hated you," and I'm like, "But why?" And it was always about the fact that I simply existed at the time. And
Wow.
so I'm still
Imagine watching
traveling with
your
my
existence
sister at
piss on
this
someone
like
off so
mood of
much.
her existence, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm basically stuck relying on her to make sure nothing happens to me, both to the plane and through the entire trip, basically.
Oh God.
Yeah. Um. Granted, when I say sis is protective, I mean like she actively states that nobody else is allowed to pick on me but her. You know. But at the same time, there is moments that it just kind of seems like she stopped caring about my existence for a bit during this trip, which I mean isn't that most surprising. But I actively remember while we were on the plane, I was sitting next to her and she was distracted in her phone. And the next thing I know, I got picked up and moved to just some other seat in the cabin by one of those steward ladies going, "You're in the wrong seat. Here, let me help you." Thinking I fucking went to the wrong place. I got
Oh
stuck next
no.
to this, like, older gentleman. I would say in his, like, 87s or something.
Mhm.
You know? And the entire time, he was just trying to talk to me. And it didn't seem weird at first, and eventually it did get that way. Yeah.
Mhm.
I
Just
basically, like, I get mad because not only was I now being forcibly relocated against my will, I wasn't allowed to leave the seat, and then spontaneously now I have this person I don't know who's being a creep. has a
uh,
has a child, you know?
I think the weirdest flight I had was that my teacher offhandedly mentioned to me one time that she was flying back to England, and coincidentally it was the same time that I was as well. Um, guess what? We were on the same airline, flying at the same fucking time on the same day, and
Yeah.
we had seats pretty much like she was two aisles, not two aisles, she was two rows behind me on the same aisle. I, I still struggle to come up with how rare that is, but also at the same time, that was really funny.
Yeah.
I also played Uno with someone that I was sitting next to for the 2 hours that I was flying to Spain, I think. So that was fun.
Yeah. Now,
I,
needless
I,
to say, I did manage to get to my, my destination without dying or anything happening, but it was definitely a very creepy experience for me.
of the bare minimum just being without dying. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. The
No
worst
death.
part about this is that, when I did meet my dad for the first time, I was around 4 years old. So it's like,
Oh,
you know, bit young.
just yeah, just a bit, just a bit young for a mother to be leaving her two daughters on,
Yeah.
you
And my
know,
sister's
just
only 5 years older than me, too.
oh god, a 9-year old and a 4-year old walking around an airport. God,
Yeah. And like
my
some things that my
parents
mom has done,
basically
I can look at it and be like, oh yeah, she cared. And then there's other moments like this where I'm like, did she? Like at all?
my parents basically didn't allow me to have a social life because they were scared that I would get into a like a bad apple group or something.
No fun.
Yeah, my parents were very protective. I didn't have my first phone until I was like 14, I think.
I didn't get my first phone until I was 12, and that was only because I had a lot of time that I wasn't available in the house, and they wanted to make
My
sure I was
my
safe.
my first phone was one of those little like not the kids ones, but one of those ones that can only call 911 or a specific number.
No,
Yeah,
one of the
my
emergency or like monitored phones.
one of the like emergency only phones that they
Oh,
track
that's
the
annoying.
location of the whole time.
Yeah, I didn't get one of those, but I did get a handy-down
Yeah,
phone,
the,
so
the second
wasn't
I
great,
saved
but
up enough money to buy my own phone, I'd literally toss that shit in the garbage.
no point in keeping that.
It's like
Uh,
I don't want parents to know my location 24/7, if that's okay with you.
uh,
What the
I
fuck?
I did end up being pretty sheltered as well, you know, because my only real time that I actively was like in the presence of society was when I went to school. And even then, I
I
basically
think,
was just lifeless, just sitting against a wall, just spaced out watching people run around the field, you know? It was pretty much
yeah.
the most I actually connected with people. I say pretty much because obviously there was
I'm gonna
some.
make plot twist of the century here. I was an antisocial child. I know. Keep your pants on. I I only had my first real established friend group when I was 14, and I only first felt like I fit in when I was 14 as well.
Yeah. For me,
Coincidentally,
I
I
only
only
really
had
did
my
when I got online.
Yeah. Coincidentally, I only had my like social, first things when I was 14 and 15, like
Yeah.
going to the mall or going shopping or having a sleepover. Like all of those happened when I was 14 or 15.
I never
Because I
experienced any of that.
yeah, it's not great, especially when especially when you're like me and just my parents just didn't give me money and I was just there.
Yeah, a lot of my interactions when I did end up having people try making friends with me was like that too. Where
Yeah.
it's like I didn't have
The whole
anything to
would you
contribute.
like to go shopping?
Yeah. It was
The
always
thing
awkward
is,
too
would you like to
because
go shopping? And then followed by, oh, I don't really have any money, and my parents are really strict with what I buy, and then
yeah,
just walking away.
I wasn't really like they weren't strict on what I could buy. Like I could come home with a dildo and they wouldn't give shits.
Yeah,
But it was a thing
I
of I just
I
had no
actually
money ever and I always felt bad when people were like, "Oh, we'll pay for it." It's like, "But I can't pay you back."
I literally came back one time with like a really tacky €2 ring from Claire's. It's like a fake jewelry store. And my
Yeah.
parents went ape shit at me. They were like, "Why are you spending stuff that won't last you?" And I'm like, "Really? It was €2. Two."
That is ugh. When you
Fake
first were
jewelry
learning
is
language, how exactly was it that you were being taught it?
um
Like obviously
let me
there's
just
the
dig into
classic you were
the
an infant and just
repressed
picking up what people
memories.
say and stuff, right? But
Let me just dig into the repressed memories real quick.
I know most
Um
people tend to have like their parents try to teach them what certain words mean, such as like mother and father to start with, and it does grow to eventually the point you start learning on your own or from school, you know?
I think I was taught to read first, I think, and then write
Really?
and then speak. Yeah,
Interesting.
because I there was this problem that I there was a problem just running around when I was little that I couldn't grasp the concept of speech at all.
Yeah.
I think my parents mentioned to me one time that I didn't say my first word until I was like 3 or 4 years old.
I actually have this kind of similar experience a little bit with that. But my
Apparently, I
experience in
was
learning language
silent.
is very different, you know? Like
Yeah.
I never actually was taught how to interact with other people, even from a young age. And like granted, I didn't bother trying to speak to my family until I was apparently around like actually yeah, when I was around 3 as well. But my mom thought I was deaf before that because of it.
Oh,
Like she thought I might be mute or something. She just didn't know. But I know that whenever I did try to interact with them, like I would hear them in a conversation and I would say a word, and then the most I ever actually got was one of them to look at me and go, wrong word, and went right back to their conversation. And I basically went from that trying to learn how, words are and how they're supposed to be used and such.
yeah.
Just with
So
that.
apparently when I was a small one, my parents so they taught me to read, then write, then speak. So what they did, they sat me down with a little fucking picture book of letters, and they just keep in mind this is what my mom told me like a couple of years back. So
Yeah.
they basically just fucking pointed out each letter, and they just go ah.
So they were
B
trying to
ready.
use that for you to try to pronounce things.
Yeah. Look,
And instead you learned how to
I
read
don't think
before
it
you
crossed
bothered to
their
try to.
mind. I don't think it crossed their mind that you have to learn how to speak to learn how to read when you're trying to read out loud.
Yeah, you kind of need that ability.
So, what I think is that my parents should have taught me either how to speak or write first, and then how to read. Actually, I think it should have gone speak, read, and then write, possibly. I don't know. Probably depends on the child.
Well, I know that before I even actually learned how to speak properly, like I still couldn't pronounce words, but I actually learned what all of the words that I was hearing meant before I even learned how to speak them. And
God,
obviously, it was way late that I learned how to read and write because,
I don't know why, but I just randomly remembered like yesterday or the day before I was out shopping with a couple of my friends, and one of the fucking employees of the not employees, one of the customers at the clothes shop that I was just in mistook me for an employee. And they're just like, hey, how much is this shirt? And I just looked at them and was like, can you look at the price tag, you dipshit?
God,
Like, even if I am an employee, I don't think I would know the price of a shirt just by looking at it.
yeah.
Just don't bug employees. Just look at the fucking price tag, dude.
About that exact kind of topic with store employees and stuff. I have two different experiences
Oh
that I want
god.
to bring.
Okay.
The first one, I learned something about stores and the fact that if you are open and talkative to people and like actively trying to interact with them, even if you're making them smile and shit, you will still be kicked out of the store.
Yeah.
I found that out because I watched somebody do it and then get kicked out of the store. Despite the fact that literally all of them were like, "Oh, I'm gonna come back in the future," because apparently that makes sense.
Yeah. Retail employees get so much shit for no reason.
Yeah, and
Especially like food. I I feel like when food is involved, it gets a lot more primal, not primal, but just I don't know. I guess it hits closer to home because it's something that you need to survive. But still,
yeah,
I wouldn't want someone yelling at me about like onions or something. You know?
yeah. I had what is like essentially the reverse of an entitled customer experience.
Oh God.
Like me
Okay.
being blind, obviously, I kind of need help finding things sometimes, right? And I asked one of the store clerks if they could help me at least find what aisle I need to be on, you know? Like just pointing in the
Reasonable
general
question.
direction even. And instead like they were just attitude with me
Oh.
immediately. Because I approached them
Oh.
and it's like I tapped their shoulder and it asked is like, hey, can you help me find this? I don't know where to find it. You know? And the person's like, why can't you fucking look at signs? To start with. Yeah.
Maybe he just had a bad day or something.
I assumed so, but like, God, I was not prepared for that.
Yeah. I
I mean,
mean,
I did
in the
try to explain
eventuality
to him
that you
is
do
like
meet
I can't
someone,
see them. I don't even know where I'm going really. And
it is an eventuality that you will meet someone that is visually impaired.
yeah.
So maybe just keep that in mind.
Yeah, but it's like when I tried to tell him, it's like, "Oh, I can't see that. I just need help finding it." You know? He wasn't listening anymore. It was just like rambling on about the fact that customers are so nosy.
Oh God.
Yeah,
I remember.
I tried to like get his attention and eventually a manager came over and before I could even say a word about it, he tried to spin it around as if I was the one yelling, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm just over
I
here being like, I just want to walk away.
I remember at one point I was doing a work experience in it was just it was a food service company. It was like a fast food company. I need to remember the one.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a very obscure one that's in Spain and literally nowhere else because it's not very branchy. But I literally got a plate of food fucking thrown at me that was covered in sauce. It was you know, it was one of those plates that come with a lot of different sauces and it just got thrown at me for no reason.
I have a bit more to that story, by the way.
Hmm.
So, the entire time this was happening, we had a customer that was sitting right behind that exact worker trying to grab something,
Hmm.
right? And right before the manager came around the corner, they were about, like, I could actively tell just from the start of what they were saying that they were about to, like, full on yell berate this man.
Oh
Right? But
God.
as soon as they heard that, I just heard a screech from the other person, and they actively were trying to defend me and made it clear it's like I didn't approach aggressively or anything else, and I was just trying to get some help because I can't see things. And they went on a rant for a good while with the manager, which again I just wanted to walk away.
I kind of want to be the
After
two
that,
arguing.
like the manager was all frustrated because he didn't know what to believe now, you know. So he quite literally called in another employee, told them to stand there and watch us, and then told everybody that's in the aisle at the time that they're not to move yet, and went to the back of the room to look at the tapes. You know, about half
Imagine
an
not being
hour.
able to keep track of a conversation.
Yeah,
Like, I know I lose myself in conversations sometimes, but literally needing someone to stand witness to a conversation that you're having is just
a bit much.
a bit much, and also it makes you come off as really stupid.
It does. I felt, I didn't know how to feel honestly. I still don't know how I felt. But about half an hour later, he comes back out, and then all like he actively took the other employee away for a bit, and then like came back sweating and apologetic, and then tried to lead me to
Oh,
said food, and tried to act like nothing happened and just wanted to sweep it under the rug.
oh,
Basically,
that's
I never saw that employee at the store again. I assume that he may have gotten fired for this.
yeah. I assume so as well.
But yeah, that was my interaction for this.
So you get yelled at by a customer, I get fucking food thrown at
Well,
me.
I got yelled at by the employee for being a
Yeah, by an
customer.
employee. So we're on two different ends here.
Very much so, yeah.
In the scenario that I star in, I'm literally the employee, and you're just
You know what's
oh
funny to
God.
me
What?
is that this lady both sounded and had the overall visual like appearance of a classic Karen.
Oh.
But she was defending me. Like she did the Karen berate stuff, but she was doing it for the right reason for once.
Oh.
Like what
Jesus.
kind of irony is this?
When you're so wrong that even the Karen has a better point than you.
Right? It is something, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure that would have gone very differently if that person wasn't there. Because I was too shy to speak, really, more than just
God.
like gentle whispering. you
Just
know?
Karens in general, sometimes they're just randomly there, and then
Yep.
other times they just feel like their existence is
Somehow
mandatory
more
for everyone
important
to bear
all of a sudden.
witness.
Just
Like
suddenly they're
my
the
existence is
king.
more
You just didn't
important
know
than
it.
yours. The
Yeah.
universe values me over you, and I am just better than you in every like. Excuse?
He said something. Or something was said
Yeah.
around him, and now his mic is muted. I think it's the second one, honestly. There was probably somebody else in the
Yeah.
background. Also, we
By
have
the
been
way,
recording for more than 30 minutes now.
oh, cool. Oh, by the way, I'd like to ask if, like, after the recording is ended, I'd like to just steal the MP3 file from
Oh,
you
yeah.
and just
I was
swap
actually
it
just gonna
over
send it
just.
to you anyways.
Oh, that okay.
So,
TY.
yeah, it's all good.
God, I don't know why, but I've started using phrases that I use while I'm texting people in regular conversation, and I feel like it's gonna get to a point where I use it in a professional situation, and it acts as a detrimental reason for me not getting the thing that I want.
It will at some point because even though we all know what that means, it also is always going to be considered a little
It's
cringy.
very unprofessional.
Yeah, it's just not normal. But then again,
Also,
realistically, language is developed and changes based upon what words mean, and the meaning of words is always shifted by society's point of view at the time.
yeah, if we
So,
look at like
you know,
more old, like old
well,
English, like
it's like the word of pog, right?
yeah, Pog
We
has
all know
basically
that wasn't
been
a thing
divided
before, but
into
we all know
general
exactly why,
language.
like when you say that, what kind of thing it's supposed to be related to. You know?
I don't. I, I think you could enter that into a dictionary, and basically everyone that knows what it means wouldn't bat a fucking eyelid, and then everyone else would be so confused.
It does actually happen. Once a word
Like,
becomes accepted by a certain amount of the populace for even just a single city, that will actively be added to a dictionary.
yeah,
And
it's,
what it classifies for the amount of a city has, I believe, hasn't changed in a few millennia now.
yeah.
So
I
once you reach that number, it's like, poof, there it is. And when you think about how fast it became widespread on Twitch, it is actually in a dictionary now, I'm pretty sure.
I think I'm still struggling to grasp like the differences between like a slang and a dialect and something that could be considered, not professional use language, but something that can be used without people being like, the fuck is that? That's not
Yeah.
English, you know?
From what I can tell, because I've been pretty much studying human my whole life, um, there isn't
Human.
one. There literally isn't one. Besides simply when they're implemented.
Sure.
So in terms of what is considered slang, it's because it's new language, not old language. It's something that's becoming used but isn't a thing before.
Yeah.
And what is typically considered professional speak, is more of you're going for the most proper and like fancy way to say it. So
Yeah.
the idea of abbreviating words, it makes you look bad.
God, I have a
So
side
you
tangent to
you've
when
heard how
something.
I speak, right? So
Mhm.
I would tend to be closer to what would be considered professional speak if it wasn't for my general personality.
Yeah. I have
Go
a
on.
I have a tiny side tangent to go on. Basically, I so this was in I don't know, but it was a while ago, and I was doing a chemistry paper, and up till then I started using the word stronk just normally, just in passing conversation. And in chemistry, there's a lot to do with bonding and like chemical bonding and stuff. And I passive not passively, I wrote the word stronk in one of my explanations on a paper that I was doing for chemistry, and I
Brilliant.
didn't realize it until after the exam had ended. So
Yeah, because
I
the
I
meaning of
got
that
the
word is
results
being
back.
shifted.
Yeah, and I got the results back from that paper, and apparently the examiner didn't notice, or they did notice, but they put a little like they put a circle around and be like spelling. Like, how can you fuck up spelling the word strong?
And then that'd be the time that I would actively like just show them exactly where you were looking when you did that.
Yeah,
Because, you know,
I mean, there isn't really anywhere else to be looking in an exam hall, to be honest.
yeah.
The only reason Stronk was written down on that piece of paper was because I'd started writing it in my notes and using it in regular conversation.
Yeah, that's only because it became widespread. Yeah.
God,
Despite the
that's
amount of time that I actually do just sit and try to understand human in general, like there is an upsetting amount of things that I come across sometimes, and I'm like, how did I not know that yet?
sometimes when I'm just like observing human behavior, just in other people, like my friends and stuff, I'm like, okay, so you come from a different part of the world, and in that part of the world, this is acceptable, but it here it's not.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just don't get how that makes sense because, well, okay, we'll take, I don't know, we'll take just culture shocks for an example.
Yeah.
That it's so confusing to me how culture can be so different around the world that something even as simple as the way you talk to someone or the way you walk or the way you thank or just anything basically can mean different things in different cultures.
Oh God, I
Like a
actually,
hand gesture can mean 10 different things in 10 different cultures.
you remember how you said that I could be a philosopher in social science?
Okay,
This is,
that's a very cut version of what I said, but yes.
yeah. So this is one of those things that, like, afterward you said that happened, that I actively was like, see, this fucking kind of proves that, doesn't it? Um, think about animals, right?
Mhm.
Elephants, for example, they have a bunch of different noises that mean a bunch of different things, right?
Yeah.
But yet, even the animals that live in the same environment, despite being able to technically communicate to each other, have different noises from each other for the same things.
It works the same as human language, except
The
human language
way
is
that
vastly more
this
complicated.
happens, right, is that you actively have something experience, and the way that we have learned to interact and to help survive for each other in a group, since we're social creatures, is by warning others. And the way that we've learned to warn each other was from audio cues. And over time, that has, developed. But, there's more and more stuff that you need more and more audio cues for. And after a certain point, it's only going to be the ones that you're directly interacting with that you come up with an idea for a language or something. It's kind of
Yeah.
like that secret hand sign that friend groups do, right?
Oh my God.
But in that sense, it's like there's no real way of that group would be able to communicate with one that is, say 50 or 20 miles away from them at that time. So there would be different audio cues assigned for different things because there's no communication between the two. And over years, this expands and, you know, became to what we have now for language.
Yeah. I
And
I
in that
was
sense,
reading
general
something.
culture tends to be made by history. It's about the overall history that that group experiences as they go, and that changes a lot.
Mm. As I was saying earlier, like I was reading something about different hand gestures meaning different things in cultures, and apparently just putting up your hand as if to say stop in like more Greek areas and like circles and stuff means fuck you or fuck off.
Yeah,
And
it
could
is
you
weird, isn't it?
imagine could you imagine like flight attendants or something on an airline with, you know, Greek Greek people and then not knowing anything about the hand gesture and just like it's so
Yeah.
confusing.
But the thing with that is that when you go to new places, most times you learn their languages and stuff. So by the time that that happens, you would know. And then when you don't know, it's always a thing of you tend to acknowledge it's a different language that you're interacting with, and that it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. It's actually the same reason on why like certain diplomatic engages never really went sour despite what it could have been. When you think about it, both Chinese and Japanese people, from what I remember, like see your pinky raised in any situation has you flipping them off.
Yeah.
But if I'm not mistaken, that's considered proper where you are when you drink tea, right? So
Yeah.
it's like it is that kind of thing when you interacted on a diplomatic level to even become neutral ground, right?
You're
it's
gonna be
interesting
pissing
that
someone off
that wouldn't have
eventually.
caused something, you know? And the only real reason is that there was that hit down knowledge of there's a that there's that barrier right there.
Like,
It
I
makes
find
things
it
different.
really odd that having a pinky raised while you're drinking something here is considered polite, but it doesn't actually fucking mean anything.
Yeah,
Nothing that humans do actually fucking means anything. Any form of communication can be gibberish if it's interpreted by anyone.
yeah. And it's crazy when you think about like what certain kinds of events or even like the small things might have changed for the overall way an entire society does something, you know? Because
Mm.
when you think
It,
about the fact that they have to have the extra metal detector despite it not being like realistically necessary was because they had a single time, despite nobody that went through it ever actually had anything on them, but one of those machines went off for 5 seconds,
like, the fact
and that
accuracy of the
caused
machine
a
permits to
big
put another
enough
one in.
yeah that caused a big enough commotion that somehow now every single airport that I go to has this layer. I don't like you know? It's
Mm.
crazy. But it was literally one incident that I can track it to, right? And it's the fuck.
Something that I find really odd is how just how much people and just humans in general rely on superstition or like believing in luck. Because as much as you want to believe it, luck isn't a fucking thing. Like you don't have a certain amount of luck. It's just sometimes
Sometimes it
things
goes
work
in
out in
your
your favor,
favor, sometimes it
sometimes they
fucks
don't.
up. Yeah. The thing with that is that it's in our nature to question the world. And a lot of these stuff started appearing because we didn't have a way to answer them, which is really the
The only
foundation for
reason
most
religion
religions
exists
in the
is just
world.
someone asked a question. Yeah.
Yeah, like and when you look at it, it's all the like philosophical questions that come in is of the world. It's the questions of what is what, and somebody gave a answer. Like they tried to come up with something that would, you know,
Yeah.
fit everything,
Yeah,
which is
if
how
you
gods became a thing, and that
if you
mindset
attempt to trace back all religions just as far as possible, you will eventually find the
that
question or the
is
core
yeah.
belief that it is based on. Just what?
And that's why
Just what?
religion has so much issues accepting science because science is answering those questions and it's
Yeah.
not the answer they want.
Hmm.
And that's the thing because they relied so much on that it became so much of a core part of who they interact with, themselves, everything. That now when they're being told that it's not that, it's they can't accept it because if they do accept it, then what happens to everything that they've known? And this is even the thing that happens to a lot of flat earthers is like they have actively admitted themselves is like even if they get proven wrong, they'll probably stay in those groups and still be a part of that community because that's where their friends are. That's the people they know. And
I saw
that's
in
how
like
that
a research
happens. But
study
it's
that that most of like the UK population is like projected to be mostly atheism and part Christianity, mainly I think not Catholicism, sorry, it's the like the Church of England, basically. And I find it really strange because if you look at statistics from like 50 years ago or something, it would be completely different. Just knowing that so many people are turning to like atheism and science and stuff is really, I don't know, I'm just really curious about what's going to happen in the future.
and that actually comes from your guys' general culture, you know.
Yeah.
You guys didn't have nearly as much of a forced religion in your past. You guys still had it.
We have our own branch of Christianity.
Yeah, but like the difference here. right? The difference in the two cultures. Medieval period, it was for you guys, it was still you were being led by the queen. Like that was the primary ruling force, right?
Or not the queen, like the royals. So it wasn't always the
Yeah.
queen, but still.
But like here most kingdoms were actually ruled by the churches.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
It was that was the ruling faction and because they had the power over the king and everyone knew it. And in that sense it became such a core thing is like if you didn't follow those religions, you tend to be killed. It was
Mm.
heavily rooted out. And most people who are considered heretics or, witches or something just because you didn't go to church one day, quite literally.
It's
And
really weird because some of that's like snuck into modern cultures and stuff where,
yeah,
you know, like people being against other people simply because of their religion or their beliefs or even their sexuality is just difference equals bad. That's basically what it boils down to. Difference equals bad.
yeah. And you can see that everywhere in humanity. For some reason, they can't look at each other and go, okay, we're cognitive beings and we can interact with one another.
Not even
And
we're the same
and instead of
species.
looking at it just like that, it's like they're looking at it going and trying, like they're actively finding any and everything that would make you not them, just to
Right.
have a conflict. And it's weird.
It really feels like humans live for conflict, even though we not I don't think everyone tries for it, but everyone at least attempts peace as much as as
Part
much
of
as it
it
doesn't
is
look
that
like it.
people
A
aren't
lot of
necessarily accepting one another when they say
mm,
peace, right?
yeah,
Because, like, think about the fact that movements all come into being. And literally, all of these movements realistically are being boiled down to they just want to be treated like a person, you
mm,
know? And in that regard of if you can't look at somebody and go, you're able to communicate and interact because like that is what is important, then that is why there's conflict and issues that you still have, you know?
I I also think it's quite odd that like if in different regions, even in different regions, not even in different countries, the aspirations or the pressure to be something changes. Like you can in England most of the time, your like most aspirations for families and stuff is for their children to grow up and be successful or like studious or they want
Yeah,
their kids to study. But
because
here in
that's what
Spain,
is
it's
required to live most times.
but here in Spain, it's a lot of focus on sports and athleticism. Like you'll have parents be like, "You need to do more exercise," like even if their kids are really fit, and I find it really strange.
It yeah.
Hi, Brad. Nice to see that you've tuned back into the conversation.
Yeah,
Last time we heard of you, you were bitching about some fat man drinking your apple juice.
the big motherfucker looked dead into my eyes as he stole my apple juice.
So
Yeah, we've transitioned a lot from airport security. We're not talking
we
about
really did, yeah.
culture, I think.
I I really like came to a realization a while ago, right? But when it comes down to it, humans are social creatures. And this is
Yeah.
why the idea of being isolated on an island or something, like in any real means, is terrifying to us. No matter who you are, really. The idea of being completely alone is something that deals a lot of damage, you know?
I find it
And the reality being is that if I were to place even the most racist person in the world on an island by themselves for years, you know, and then sent a big black person, someone who they clearly will not be able to mess with, and send them to that island as well after that, right? That person will eventually be like, actually interacting with the other person like a person because they can't get away with it otherwise, right?
Yeah.
But something
I
to
think
note here, it's they wouldn't even have been trying if it wasn't for the fact that at this point that they were willing to put aside their prejudice in the first place to at least communicate with something else.
yeah.
And when you think about it this way, the reality being you can bring that person back now and they would be able to interact with society without hating literally anybody because it no longer matters the differences at that point to them. It's about the fact
Yeah,
that they are communicating.
but I feel like having to get rid of racism by hard coding a traumatic experience into
Yeah,
someone's brain is a bit of a
I'm not
push
saying
for
that's exactly what we would do, right? But it's more of the concept
yeah, I
because
get that.
when you put it to this thing, it means that it's a core thing in your survival to prioritize other people interaction still than to not.
That's why the
And
trope of
when
the
it comes
like I
down
want
to it,
everyone
it
else to
should be
die person doesn't make any sense.
yeah.
Like
Because even if they were serious about it and went through it, they would reach a point where they would simply kill themselves in the end because of it.
yeah.
We
As
will
much as people hate
actively
to admit it,
lose
they
our
have to be
minds without
around at
another
least one
creature to
person.
interact with. And it has to be a creature that can actively interact socially with us. Which is the only reason dogs are so close to that because we can visually see their emotions and how they're like
Yeah.
feeling to what we do. But
Cats
even then,
cats
like
are just emotionless
there is
bastards.
still that time that the dog just isn't enough because you're not really interacting with them, you're just trying not to hurt them.
Yeah.
And that's different.
I feel like no matter how introverted you are, there will be a point where you literally have to talk to another person, otherwise, it
Yeah.
just
I mean, I've been the shy girl that's been sheltered my whole life, you know? And I still actively got to a point where I ended up trying to interact with people. You know, it's like,
there's also like a side I think with extroverts, like I feel like if you're an extrovert and you're not around people for a while, you'll start to realize, oh wait, I need people to exist around me, you know? I can't really talk for extroverts because I'm not one, but that's
yeah, I
my
kind of
take on the
experienced that
situation.
too. I do get rather lonely, really, but it is the thing of even just somebody being around my general presence is enough for me sometimes. It's
It's
literally just,
comforting.
it's the idea of not being alone. But really, the reason we're introverted is because it gets overwhelming when trying to interact or be a part of things or around others. And it's not like we don't care, it's just hard for us to process it, you
Oh,
know?
something just popped into my mind that I think is correlated with this, but just the feeling of like, for example, you've got an assignment, it's really important or something, and you haven't done it, and your
Yeah.
friend texts you that they haven't done it either, and then it's just the feeling of relief that you're not the only one that's completely fucked. That I don't know, that has like a similar psychological aspect to it
It
when we're also
is.
talking about like social aspects of human life.
Yeah, it's the need to be apart. But it's also
Yeah.
crazy because when you try to be apart for things, you tend to overwhelm yourself. And like, sure, I can only speak from my own experience, you know, but from what I have noticed, it's if the person is there and is like mild, you know, kind of like a sleepy dog almost. it it really doesn't process for me, you know,
Yeah.
because I understand that they're there and I feel like happier because they're there, but it's also like I don't feel like I'm being overwhelmed or that it's intrusive, you know?
Mhm.
And it makes a really crazy difference. It's kind of like the
I
idea
think
of just being able to walk in, like walk throughout the house and see that life exists, kind of thing. It somehow
Oh god, the
feels
feeling of walking
better
through an
than
empty
when
house is
I
so
just,
strange.
stay alone.
I find it really odd how I could be with like the quietest, most, peaceful person in person, just like sitting next to them talking to them. But
Oh
like
yeah.
the second I interact with someone who's really quiet online, I just get uncomfortable. It works the other way around with extroverts actually. I get uncomfortable with extroverts in person, but online it's just a lot more like together.
Yeah. Like I actively like get overwhelmed with anxiety when I even think of the idea of meeting somebody in person, you know? And I know very well that I tend to just stay quietly in the like darkest corner of the room, you know? Just don't really want to be noticed. I just don't, I'm better passive observer most times. But I can't stand it when they're just quiet, you know?
Silence, especially when there's another person who can interact with you like in your presence, is it's so frustrating.
Yeah. And it's weird because it's not just the fact that I'm not being judged off of looks anymore. It's something else. I just don't really understand what it is that makes me feel so much more comfortable to just be my fucking self when I'm online, you know?
I don't think anything hits harder than being judged for your personality of all things. Nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely fuck all, because that's something that's basically innate in every person, is their personality.
Yeah, it's
Like
something
some
that is granted it's growing and changing, yes, but it's one of those things that even the like small things that you grow and change out of, it's still going to be there. It's never something you can get rid
yeah,
of
like
because
you
it's a
can't
part
change
part
from
of how you interact with the world now.
you cannot change from an introverted to an extroverted person on the flip of a coin. You can't.
Yeah,
It's literally impossible. It has to gradually change or it doesn't happen. Or like small personality trait or like habits, even habits. Habits
yeah,
are psychological phenomena that don't really they make sense, but they don't at the same time.
yeah,
It's very
they do.
complicated.
And it's one of those things that it's the same in the sense that it became core to a lot of the stuff you do, you know? And one of the biggest things with humans is patterns, and of all kinds. Your brain remembers things that are based in patterns significantly more, and you will always find things more entertaining if there is a pattern in it.
Yeah.
And because of this, you end up doing patterns. It's kind of like setting up a system to be on autopilot, you know?
Mhm.
And because of this, when you go to try to change those things, anytime you would have naturally gone into that autopilot, it will. Because, that's still what it knows. That's still the pattern that was there. Which is why it's so annoying to break those.
Yeah.
Because now you end up with a pattern that would be back and forth while you're trying to fix it.
But why did I suddenly think of abstract art when you were talking about that? I don't know. I just feel like it fits into the conversation topic.
It does. It's the idea of entertainment and interaction through patterns. And a lot of art
Yeah.
is patterns, especially abstract art.
Abstract art relies on the interpreter being able to see something in it. Like, there
Yeah,
was one point
which
where I was watching
requires
one of
certain types of
my
patterns.
I was watching one of my coworkers paint something for a client the other day, and I was just watching them. They were just painting. They weren't looking at anything. They were just painting, and I just randomly said, "Hey, that looks like an avocado." It didn't have it didn't have the colors or like any resemblance or pattern to an avocado. It was just like an abstract blob shape with a little circle in the middle, and I was like, "Hey, that looks like an avocado." I
Because
don't
it
it's like
follows close enough to what you would think of an avocado. Like, can you think of any other thing that would have fit that description better,
Uh,
realistically?
no.
And there it is. It was close enough to the memorization of what an avocado looks like.
Avocado.
Yes.
Okay.
Totally did not just have like a spontaneous word vomit moment that I tried to fix mid go.
Avocado. 1 second.
Thanks for that. Is that going to be the name of the video?
No, I'm gonna put a timestamp in the description saying at this time Keba says avocado.
Thanks for that. Or not. But yeah, it was a pattern, basically. Long and the short of it. Ta-da!
I still have one of the bones in my fucking toes. The fuck?
I did not
Ow.
hear the first part of that.
I just cracked one of the bones in my like you know how you crack your knuckles? Yeah, I just did that on
Yeah.
one of my toes.
Uh, you don't do that often, do you?
No.
Oof.
Mm.
I mean, I used to at one point, and then I just stopped.
You know what I find really weird?
What?
The fact that okay, I'm gonna go into an Apple versus literally anything else conversation for a bit. But like
Okay.
the fact that Apple can basically advertise like software and hardware that is inferior to a competitor, yet most of the general public will buy an Apple product
But,
even after being told that it is inferior.
and that is
I
not
find
even
that really
considering
strange.
about the fact that the product is more expensive 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, I find that really strange.
I don't even when you realize the fact that you can't repair your shit from Apple either. They are
You have to get it repaired
anti-repair.
at Apple.
Yeah, but Apple doesn't repair shit because it's easier to get you to buy a brand
Oh
new
yeah.
thing.
Like how I broke my laptop, like my Mac screen, and they were just like, "Yeah, we'll just get a new one. Just pay us like $300." They didn't
Yep.
even have a look at the anything internally. They were just the instant conclusion was just, "Yeah, we'll get a new one."
You know what the crazy thing is?
What?
The display itself is removable from the actual motherboard, which means that you could replace that separately. And all you actually needed to do was open up the thing and take off the one connecting piece from everything else, and you can replace the entire display.
Yeah.
Which
Anyway,
at
back to
most
that
would have
Apple
cost you
versus
about
literally
like
anything else
50
thing.
bucks.
Yeah, that was $300 that I had to pay for, and it wasn't even my fault.
Yeah,
Hannah literally poured fucking coffee on my laptop on accident, and I was just,
that's the reason and why there's the Right to Repair Act,
yeah.
because that's kind of needed.
By the way, anyone who's watching and doesn't know who Hannah is, she's my roommate. Bit of a dunce. Even more of a dunce than I am. She set my toaster on fire one time. We won't talk about
You know,
that.
typically you're supposed to keep anonymity when you go over stories or reference people.
I
Just
don't
thought I'd
give a
mention
fuck.
that. Yeah, I fuck that up
Because
too, but you are
I'm gonna talk
like
about the bitch so often that the name Hannah is gonna become something that is just there, you know?
there. Yeah. It's just typically for some reason it's actually not for some reason, but it's considered bad for us streamer people's bad practice,
Mm,
you know?
yeah.
But that's just
Yeah.
kind of how it
I-
goes, I
I'm
guess.
still baffled by the fact that the general public will buy a product that is inferior even after being told that it is inferior, simply
Yeah,
because of reputation, I'm guessing.
yeah,
Not even
that's really what it
reputation,
is. It's a known brand.
marketing. It's a known fucking brand.
Simple as that.
God, that's actually terrifying when you think about just the
Yep.
the fact that society likes to herd, like metaphorically herd, and just do whatever the fuck everyone else does, when
Yeah.
you don't even know who's leading the charge, they don't even know what they're doing. Half the time,
It
no
it
one's even leading
is
the charge. It's strange.
it is always insane when in reality. Because in the end of the day, it's them repeating the same action repeatedly and expecting different results, which is the definition of
Yeah.
insanity, you know?
Yep.
Because
I
that's
just gotta
really what it
say.
is. It's the thing of, for some reason, they don't understand that their actions are exactly what's causing them to be so separated like they are, and why they're being viewed the way that they're being. And it's weird, you know? Because in reality, it's like nobody said that you had to cut communication with somebody when you decide to go, oh, I see I was wrong here, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the reality. You don't have to actively support what they believe in anymore, but you can still be around them.
Yeah.
I know I'm
I
kind of
find
that
it.
way with some of my friends that are vegan. You know, like they talk about it often, and I just go along with it because, you know, they're my friends. I may not agree or like want to be vegan personally, but I will still accept them.
I mean, my mother's vegetarian, and she doesn't even bother trying to preach like her, not beliefs, but like her habits to me. She
Yeah,
just cooks. She just cooks me what she thinks I'd like, and it's that. I make sure not to include meat in whatever the fuck she's eating when I'm cooking. It just stays consistent, you know?
yeah. And like realistically, we already eat just plant food sometimes. I mean, like what is a peanut butter sandwich? Honestly.
Peanuts and cow.
Well, jelly
Whatever the
isn't
fuck.
from cows.
Oh,
It's from grapes
isn't
and stuff
isn't
like that.
wait, isn't gelatin made from hooves or something?
No, we're not talking about gelatin. We're talking about, jam and stuff like that.
Oh, jam.
Yeah,
God damn it, you
it
fucking
jam and
Americans
jelly are
calling
the
jam
same.
jelly.
Yes.
No, shut up. Actually, shut the fuck up. You fucking
When
Americans
we
calling
refer to
jam jelly.
gelatin
I do
stuff, we
not
tend to
want to
call it
fucking
jello, and
hear it.
yeah. Anyhow. Yeah, but realistically, that entire thing is a plant-based meal, right?
Technically.
And our species is designed to be omnivores. We can eat both.
Like, we
So
don't need to eat meat,
realistically,
but we
as
want
long as the
to.
food you are able to digest it and that it has a taste that is, good,
Mm.
then it doesn't really matter what it's made out of, does it?
I think most vegetarians want to, sorry, most vegetarians and vegans want to pursue that eating style mainly either because of morals or because of health, I think.
Yeah. In
The
general, it
health
is considered more healthy because you're not gaining as much fat, but realistically, you do still need things like the protein that you can only really get normally from meat, you know?
Yeah. The health aspect makes sense. The morals, I mean, if we're gonna eat meat, like at least we'll be quick and efficient about it. Like, I don't know, do you want to kill the cow slowly or something? What the fuck else are we gonna do?
Well, there's
Like,
also the idea that you don't necessarily have to kill an animal or to harm them to get meat. They're going to die anyways.
true, true.
And there is a period of time after a body dies that it is still usable. Otherwise, killing them to get meat in the first place wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And we do have places that we actively, house an entire of one type of species. Like that is kind of how a sheep farm, isn't it?
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
how we get lamb chops, I'm pretty sure. It's when the, sheep dies because
and
normally it's for
wool.
the cotton. Yeah, they're getting the wool more than anything. That's really what
I
sheep are
think
more
wool is
for.
prioritized over
But we
meat
get lamb
because
chops when they die, right?
wool is a more useful material than,
Yes.
meat.
Fabric in general has a higher price on it than food does for
I
that
mean,
industry.
yeah, textiles over food. I think that's pretty cut and dry. That's been just a principle for probably a while.
Well, it's like, yeah, food is good for survival, but realistically, the textile itself gets used in everything from building to like general, resource gathering and all kinds of shit.
Basically, the
It
shit making
covers
us warm and
more
not fit.
industries than food itself can. So it's more
Yeah,
profitable to take the wool itself than to kill the sheep. So they just wait until the sheep dies.
yeah. And who the fuck is gonna stop them? Like, that's. I mean, yeah,
And who's to say we
amount
can't do the same kind
incarceration.
of stuff with the cows, right? Because it's not like it
True.
hurts them to get the milk. I know that's a like an argument people try to make, but here's something that most people don't realize. Nature isn't like friendly to any species. A
Yeah.
goat can kill itself on its own horns because the horn grew too much. In the same sense, if you don't milk the cow every so often, it will overflow itself and eventually can burst, if I remember correctly.
I
As
think
such, you're
we'll have to check
supposed to
sources
do
on that one.
that. You're supposed to do that.
And
And
like
then
a
the way
sheep
that they
will
milk
literally
a
fucking
cow is
overheat if they
actually in
give
the
it too much
same
milk.
form that would happen if a calf was sucking on the mother's tit. You know?
Lovely,
So
eloquent
in
take
that
for
sense,
that
it's
one, Keba.
no fucking difference.
But like, back to the sheep and wool thing. A lot of people protest against it, but they don't realize that if sheep aren't sheared often, they will literally die from overheating in the summer. Like,
Yes, not just in the summer either. And there's also a different thing that people don't seem to get is that the hair, it's like the wool itself can get really tangled. And after a bit, it could cause, like all kinds of damage. And it can also end up like overlaying themselves. And if a sheep gets too heavy in its wool, it'll be unable to move.
yeah,
Like you can
is
actually like find a sheep that is basically a turtle and
is
stuck on its
this the
back.
fucking peaceful life for sheep you wanted, vegans, or whoever the fuck is talking
Yeah,
about this? Here, have it. Not
when
moving sheep.
people like wild sheep all the time end up getting stuck and have to have random people stop on their journeys to flip them back onto their feet because they're too heavy with the wool. They can't get
I've
back
seen
up.
a lot of I've seen a lot of videos about it, and I find it kind of funny. But sometimes sheep are literally just like legs up in the air, just on the fucking
Yeah.
road.
But yeah, this is an actual problem. And it even gets worse when you consider the fact that when you get a herd of sheep like that haven't been tended to for a bit, they can actively cause an entire terrain to landslide.
What?
Yeah, even like a horde of 20 sheep, right, was enough to cause an entire mountainslide to churn into what is basically just mud from just walking.
Mudslide.
They literally went from
Oh,
one side of the mountain to the other side, and the entire like mountainside did an avalanche.
Jesus Christ.
And that was simply because they were too heavy for the terrain that they were walking on.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
And here I was thinking that my dog stepping on me was painful.
Yeah, in fact, most flatlands where sheep would graze often, they tend to have to put a bit, like I think a quarter inch extra cement into the ground than normal to help make sure the foundation
Percolate.
stays, because it will sink slightly down.
Fuck. That. Ugh.
But if you go
This
right next
heavy
to where the sheep
bastard.
have been grazing a lot, you don't need to do that. It won't do it. It won't sink.
Heavy
Like they are
bitches.
actively causing terrain problems across the board by their mere existence because somebody hasn't come along with a razor in a few days.
Well, like,
So,
a while.
yeah, I mean, obviously it doesn't grow that fast, but hey.
Could you imagine?
Oh god. I mean, we wouldn't be so worried about running out of that material then, would we? Probably
Yeah.
never need more than one farm. But God, would that farm be busy? Oh, she is deafened. Hmm. Well, that is interesting, isn't it? Also, we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes. What do you know?
Sorry, my neighbor just walked in.
Oh. Well, hey, at least now we know. Goodness sakes. I don't know what to say now.
Sí, gracias, Maria. Sorry, I'm back.
Hi. I also hear you
Yeah.
just randomly spoke in a different language.
Yes. My my neighbor walked in. Appar- Apparently, she had a bunch of like leftovers from like a really big meal she had with her family, and she couldn't keep them in her fridge, so she just offered them to me.
Ah. We have hit an hour and 20 minutes already.
Wow.
Yeah, we've been talking for a bit apparently. Especially since
Wow.
we were
Holy
talking
fuck.
before we started recording.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, I still find it really odd that we literally have, well, Easter is a holiday that celebrates someone's death, I think.
it
I
is.
think.
It is.
And it's a bunny that shits eggs,
Yep.
apparently.
You know what the funny part is?
What?
It's supposed to symbolize both the death and rebirth of Jesus for Christianity. And they
Bunny
symbolize that with a bunny that shits
that shits
eggs
eggs.
that you have to find and collect to eat.
I-
Yep.
Christianity, get your shit together. Come on.
Because, why not? Eventually, it did get changed to just the death of Christ because the, you know, initial birth
But
of Christ was, Christmas, and they decided that it would be quote unquote shameful, I think.
a lot of, I find it weird that a lot of Christians, not that they can't accept it, but that they just aren't aware of the fact that a lot of, like, a lot
The
of the
Bible
stuff
has
that,
been revised a lot of times.
Yeah, a lot of the shit that
That's something that,
Jesus and
you
that
know,
kind of stuff was based on. Apparently, Jesus was a Jew, I think, or was supposed to be one, like represented as one
yes,
in like
actually,
most
like
of
most of
the
their
texts.
stories was about Jewish
Yeah,
areas.
and a lot of people are just like, no, that can't be real.
Yet it's even more of a thing. Like my grandmother adamantly is like, no, the Bible doesn't get altered and changes and stuff. But then she's also like, oh, well, it's been changed recently, but I'm still have the original. And I'm like, bitch, you
Original
don't have the
Bible.
fucking original. All right, that thing has been translated 2 to 3 times before it became in our fucking clutches in English for our broken ass language over here. All right. There's no damn way it's been written that many times and is still 100% accurate to the very first time it was ever created. No fucking way.
Yeah,
And then
no,
she also wants to be like, oh, well, God, wrote through somebody, and, but so it was straight from God. And I'm sitting here
not.
being like, no fucking way that that is the case. You cannot tell me, for any manner of speaking, that for somehow that this hasn't been tainted by humanity.
You cannot
There's
tell
no
me that
way.
some random bitch in the sky is like, okay, so write that, that, and that in this order. No.
And, like, it gets even further when you realize this goes like beyond the idea of you know anything, because when you look at any history of Christianity, there is so many moments in there that is not even actually written in the Bible that they're like, oh, well, we're justified because it said so in this book here that has nothing to do with it at all.
I feel like they rely on how big the Bible is as a book, that
Witch
the
hunts.
person that they're talking to is just
Witch
not willing
hunts.
to go through that much pain.
Yeah. the entire thing with witch hunts, there is not a single thing that has ever been in any iteration of the Bible, from what I've heard, that actually mentions anything about witches and devils being correspond at all.
Yeah.
Not a thing. But yet, here it was, in your guys' religion's history, and was widely accepted by a lot of people. This isn't one of
At
those
least in
kind of
your
things that
guys,
isn't going to be corrupted by humanity. It will be, and has been, and still is.
you cannot sit here and tell me that they were under oath the whole time they were writing the Bible and didn't think, oh yeah, I'll just add or remove this. No,
Yeah.
no.
Like,
Or that they
people
got,
have too
or
much
that
of
they
a
got
need to
nothing wrong.
censor things that feel like out of place for themselves. And you can't really tell me that the person who wrote that didn't write it to try to gain some power of their own. After all,
It's not even the
Christianity was made after other religions were.
Keba. In basically, in a lot of psychological studies, there's been a phenomena that's happened where people censor or change or alter events, or not events, details about events that have happened in their minds, like subconsciously,
Yeah,
without realizing it. And
all the time.
it's got a name. Fuck, it's got a name or something. But basically, they reshape details to fit with what better fits their past experiences and their like what's happened to them.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it.
But it is one of those kind of things that's just like, the more you look into the idea of how, we interact with one another, or how one's mind is supposed to function, the more like things like this appear that it's just baffling.
Weird how I use my psychology GCSE more than I use literally anything else in passing conversation.
I mean, think about it this way. I've never passed things like language arts and shit. I've never gone to college and was a dropout, you know? And yet, sometimes it just makes no difference if you went to it or not.
I got like one of the best scores in my entire year group in chemistry, and I literally never talk about chemistry in passing conversation. Because why the fuck would you? Why would you?
Exactly.
Unless
It
you're in a
was the same
professional
thing I had an
environment,
issue
which
with like
covers,
other stuff that I was being taught in school. It's just like, I didn't see any place that this would be used.
yeah,
And like
like
at the
unless you're in a
time,
professional environment that covers the topic that you're talking about, this isn't going to be said ever, ever.
yeah, like the likelihood of you needing that info was, not very high.
I'm gonna start talking about like the Pythagorean theorem or the area of a cone or something in just like it, like no.
Yeah. And it's like, sure, I went through math, and honestly, like I only ever got as like lower, like my lowest score was ever a C in math. And there is so many times I find myself just not doing math for shit at all, you know?
Same, but sometimes I use like Excel to calculate some of the most basic shit.
Yeah. It
You will
it
find
gets
me
worse
using
because
Excel to
sometimes,
calculate things.
yeah, sometimes I can like almost instantly come up with an answer for like a weird complicated thing, and then I fucking come across something basic and like, addition or times table. I'm like, fuck, what was that again? Just
Why can I imagine you just sitting there working out like the sine or like sin tan cos or something, and then just looking at 3 plus 2 and being like, hmm.
it basically felt like that. It felt like that. I was doing fractions, to get
Oh God.
measurements for my sword, right? I was doing that,
Hmm.
and I was able to quickly look at like how long it like I already had and how much I was wanting to add about, and was able to do the math in my head completely. But when it came time to literally do like a like trying to do basic math afterward, because I wanted to do, I think it was like 27 plus 89.
That's
I I I
101,
couldn't.
and then it's 90. That's 116.
Yeah, I wasn't something that I was able to answer nearly as fast as I, for some reason, could figure out the fractions, despite this realistically being way more basic math. You know?
Mm. Just, yes.
I had to stop and think about it for a minute, and then at some point I'm like, I think it's this, I'm not sure, and I had to pull out the calculator anyways. Because that's how it works.
Yeah, there's not much math when it comes to like interior design, but you gotta measure shit like really exactly with the tape measure. And sometimes
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here like measuring the dimensions of a room, and I'm just like, wait, what's this? Like, what's 39 plus 8 again? Just
Yep, that's all it takes.
I'll be sitting there measuring a window frame, and then I'll be like, wait, what?
And it's crazy because like, oh, well, you need to know circumference of something. No, you fucking don't.
No, no, you
If
don't.
you know the
Fuck off.
general like outside shape size, you're fine. You got this.
You only need to know how to measure something. Like, if you're measuring, like, you only need to know how to measure the circumference of a circle if you're, like, making a circle rug in interior design. Because you're just gonna place that shit on the floor. You don't need to know the area of it.
You just need to know exactly how much space it might cover.
Yeah.
Right, and like it basically be video game fucking house decoration shit, where it's just like you have a basic square around whatever object, and it's just gonna, if it fits in that general square, you got it.
Yeah. Floor tiles. Floor tiles. Lovely
Just,
floor tiles.
you know? And that's the reality, though. I think the only time you would ever actually need to know how to make the circumference of a sphere is if you're trying to do like some sort of 3D form of art around the idea of a sphere. Because
Yeah.
even making a sphere
No.
when like painting or sketching, you don't fucking need that.
You don't need to calculate anything. You just need to know how to shade. That's it.
Yeah. And
At
when you
math
do other
teachers, learn
3D
how to
shit, it really
shade.
is just like you're basically putting a box in a box, and that's about it to make a 3D square. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You don't need to know any fucking measurements to do that shit.
The only thing I can really think of that requires math and measurements, probably like costume design or something.
Basically,
Maybe.
yeah.
Or architecture. Architecture.
It's literally creating something physically from nothing, but a bunch of random
Mathematics.
materials. And that's the
Could you
only real
imagine?
time you need that.
Could you imagine teaching children a subject only for them to basically vomit that knowledge onto other children?
Yeah.
That's so stupid. It's it makes no sense to learn a subject for the sole purpose of like I can't put this into words without it sounding really fucking stupid. But
So
like
this is something that I just like popped in my head. But both in the UK and here, there was a phenomenon that happened, not exactly at the same time, but both in our history. And it's something our histories have in common, which is at
tell
some
me,
point, the education system went from prioritizing things like basic common sense and
I know,
being able to put things
industrializing.
together and switched it to you remember only what we tell you you need to remember. And since
I
then,
think it was
it
the time
has
of the Industrial
declined in
Revolution.
terms of society's educational level.
I
Our
think at the
general understanding of the world and like the general populace intelligence, like the average has gone down consistently
mm,
since that
like
decision has been made.
even though the average high school student now knows more than like the average scholar something like 500 years ago, it doesn't mean that we're getting smarter. It just means that we know a bit more. Like knowing more doesn't correlate to
Yeah.
IQ. it just means that you know a little bit more.
Well, it's like we're able to observe and see the world a lot better, and we have general ability, and things get thrown in our faces a lot more, you know? So at the same time, it's like, sure, we can answer some questions that, we probably wouldn't have been able to anyways. But at the same time, it's fucking detrimental to us across the board because it's not that it's from the education system, it's just from us being able to see the world.
On the topic of the education system,
Oh god.
I was researching a couple months. I already know why you're saying "oh God" because I think you know what I'm talking about.
A
Like a
little
couple
bit.
months ago, I was researching it, and I got from multiple sources the statement, quote, "The educational system in most parts of the world has not changed since the Industrial Revolution."
Yep.
That is whack. It
That is just how it is.
like
And
the
that's why there is that entire thing of people being upset with educational systems now because they do
it
not
doesn't work.
fit what is going on in the world.
I mean, it works, but it's not
Like
good. Like
when you had the time of building things in the Industrial Revolution, you had to know how to build buildings, you had to know how to like do basic mechanics and stuff. So the idea of trying to prioritize things like mathematics makes more sense for that, Because in the time frame, that's exactly what you needed to get a job. That's what 90% of your work was going to likely require, you know?
or just
But
knowing how to
in the
like obey
times that have
instructions.
now, like from then, is just not like that. And now it's a detrimental to try to prioritize stuff like this. Because sure, it's probably not a bad thing for us to know, this, but it shouldn't be a thing of this is prioritized.
Yeah, I feel like the education system should value creativity a bit more over like standard mathematics. Like, I get following language and mathematics and sciences is good, but creativity also needs to like allowed to be breathed, like to breathe a little bit, because
Yeah,
mathematics follows rules. You can't really discover anything in mathematics unless you really like devote so much time into it that you just discover a phenomena in mathematics.
yeah.
But inventing something or developing something with computer code or like developing something in medicine or like biology or physics or something like that.
It
That's
needs creativity.
yeah,
You can't develop something off of nothing unless you have an imagination and some sort of creativity. And that's the reality. And like one of the biggest things in terms of what really makes you intelligent isn't necessarily the amount of information you have, but more of the way that you are able to process the world. And for me, I wouldn't say that I knew a lot, really, but I still got considered smart for my age, and that was merely because I could interact a bit with it. I actively tested shit out and figured out what could or could not work, and fuck, God. Yes, I fucked God. That's how I got here. No,
we got a cough button over here, Jesus. Fucking hell.
uh, but no, I actively like put two to two together and try to think outside of what I was seeing at that time.
Mhm.
And like, sure, I would still be researching the information I had, then, but I was able to use my creativity to try to come up with things to do with it as well. It, you
Sorry,
know,
I'm just
and basically, I became aware of like basic common sense, being able to put information together and to be able to like try to come up with different types of scenarios, you know? And in this sense, I was able to learn information a lot easier because I had, accomplished that. But that is something that used to be taught, that used to be prioritized in schooling to help you learn that kind of stuff on top of general information for survival, you know?
Do you know what really fascinates me? I
Hmm.
think I'm like moving away from the whole education topic. So if you want to like interrupt me,
That's
but
all good.
I think something that really fascinates me is like psychology in children, especially like development of like children, just like a bias from a psychological standpoint. Like, what changes in a child's brain that makes them be able to understand what another person is feeling, or like have abstract or like abstract debates about something, or I don't know, maybe.
So, in terms of being able to register other people's like emotion, right? There is obviously like the core emotions that everybody feels, and that's just part of, the general evolution of our species at this point, you know? And when it comes down to watching that, there's certain cues that is always associated with it, you know? And you basically you are able to kind of see some of the things you do in yourself, right? So even as an infant, if you were to up to an infant and just start scream crying like they do, most times they'll look at you and go, "What?" kind of on their face.
Confused.
But the thing is that part of that is because they're acknowledging that that's what they do when they're upset.
Yeah,
And so now they're partially questioning of why they're suddenly upset, and also, oh God, what's happening at the same time, right? But in that sense, it's you already start off with a slight self-awareness. You
yeah,
understand your kind of general state of being, even as an infant, because how else are you going to let the mother know that something's wrong with you and stuff? And that simply gets developed over, by interacting with it. For me, the reason I have so much issues understanding my own emotions before I was able to understand other people's as well was because it wasn't interacted with. I never actually got to express my emotions or to feel them. So it's foreign to me now, you know?
yeah.
But in that same sense, that people who tend to be allowed to express those and stuff tends to be more aware of other people's general standoffness or, you know, existence, which is why it's
I
also women tend to be more, aware or understanding of each other than guys are because women tend to be allowed to express that stuff more than others.
I
Because
feel
if you can't
like
see it in yourself, you can't expect to see it in someone else.
yeah, but I feel like just psychology psychology in general, but also mainly psychology in infants is it's such a like in the dark sort of topic because what
Yeah,
parent would like actively let a psychologist just examine their child constantly, like there's just the moral issues that are really blocking it, but there's nothing
yeah.
we
The
can really do
most,
about
like,
it.
realistically, my information on this subject really just comes from watching the world, you know? Just passively being in environments that have all kinds of people and just seeing how they interact. That's the only reason I ever figured out what emotions were supposed to be coordinated to what, because I would actively, hear it be talked about and explained when people talk to each other. And I also sometimes saw it happen. And I was able to put the information together and figure it out in the end. But it still became a thing in the end where I was significantly lacking and still am in that regard of just understanding how interactions work?
Yeah, it's that whole like, oh yeah, I'm studying how humans work.
Yes, I did indeed study humans. Not necessarily like I went to school for it, of course, but more of I did devote a lot of time just trying to understand others. And because of this, I notice things like that, where it doesn't really matter what species you are, or, what gender, how old, what none of that. That there is certain core things that if you do, you tend to be able to communicate with another creature because it's so primal, you know?
My
And
internet
it
really
makes a
fucked up there for a
difference.
second. Holy shit. There was some robot voice there for a second.
Yeah. When you realize that part of things, at least for me, it made it a lot easier to start connecting people together and to be able to start realizing, a lot of the stuff that does communicate for others. But in that same sense, it is definitely something that isn't really researched because I doubt anybody has gone past what I basically just did, you know, in terms of registering it. Because it's hard to be able to analyze the mind in the first place, let alone to do it to one that technically doesn't have a functioning one.
Yeah, that's
you know? Because anything that
yeah.
you do around that infant will shape the very core of their being.
Nature versus nurture. That's the exact name for that thing in psychology.
Yeah.
What affects a child's development?
But
Is it
I
innate
can
in
say
them,
that
or is it
when I
what?
when I was watching my family and, the sex jokes happened around me a lot, right? Not only has the overall perversion kind of stuff that goes with that been literally ingrained in my personality at this point, but it also was a thing that it took me a little bit to realize the difference between, serious and joking. So I was confused for so long. Like, the ridiculous amount of time I actually spent just trying to understand what it was that they were going on about. You know? Because it's not
Yeah.
necessarily that I comprehend what they were saying yet, but I knew that they were saying something that felt weird. I don't know. And at some point, I realized, that they were happy sounding when they were talking about it. And so at some point, it became acknowledged to me. It's like, oh, that's a good thing then.
Sex joke
And
equals happy.
yeah, that's really what I went into. Which of course led into one of those classic children moment where like I was sitting at Christmas and
Oh
I saw somebody sad and I think I tried to make a sex joke. Which obviously didn't blow over well.
no. Just uh
But like when you consider this, the only reason I really remember that is because it didn't blow over well, right? Because it was such one of those memories that was enough to alter how I try to approach people. And granted, at the time, I didn't necessarily correlate the two of sex joke and their response, but more of the fact that the idea of trying to interact with them caused that response, which then in turn made me uber shy for most of my life.
or shy.
And it's like, sure, technically it wasn't a huge thing that happened, but it was enough to core, the change so much about everything I did with the world.
Yeah. How fucking long have we been talking?
Oh, 1 hour and 48 minutes, about to be
Jesus.
49.
Wow.
Almost 2 hours.
Would you like to cap it off here?
I mean, we can.
Okay.
Well, then I guess goodbye, people who watched this.
Bye everyone. Remember,
The most
apparently
like,
stealing is for
uh,
pussies, which is
we
background on
really
my
did not
channel.
plan this shit out. We just don't.